All right, let's get started on our new tshuva. Okay, din chiyuv makeh b'brechat shchia. The obligation to make a parapet around a swimming pool. Yeah. Now, okay, here we go. So we know that there is a mitzvah in the Torah to make a parapet or a fence on a rooftop that is regularly used to prevent people from falling off the roof. What about making a parapet around a swimming pool? Is there such an obligation? I know when my son, who now lives in Boca, when they moved to their new home, and there was a swimming pool in the backyard. It's not a big house, but it's got a swimming pool. A lot of the homes in Florida have swimming pools, and we said we're not going to whatever it costs, you got to pay for. We'll help you fund it. You need to build a fence around the pool because you have small kids. End of story. Nothing to talk about. Now, does he have a biblical obligation to do that anyway to protect his family? Or is it something at a person's discretion? You're a private homeowner. I'm sure there's no law in Ontario that obligates you. There is?
Oh, yeah. You need a fence around the pool. If not, someone gets hurt or died, your personal liability, or even they jump over your other fence. It's a law, you have to put a fence around the pool.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that.
Very explicit.
Doesn't have to have a specific gate block on it as well.
Yes, they're very tough on that law.
There's a case a few years ago where some teenagers climbed over a low fence, which, they easily just hopped, went into a pool, got drunk. One idiot got on the house drunk, did a backflip and landed on the concrete deck. And became a paraplegic and sued the owners of the pool for not having a high enough fence to protect them from coming in, and they got insurance. They won. We got like $1 million for the owner not having the fence high enough.
That's ridiculous.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone felt empathetic to the victim, but what a goof. Right?
So obviously in Florida, that's not the law.
Yeah, apparently that's not the law in Florida, because this swimming pool did not have any kind of fence around it.
So I don't know how high it has to be or whatever, but I think Hal's right. I think you do have to have a fence.
I did not know that about Ontario, but I should have guessed everything in Canada is regulated.
That law I agree with 100%.
Yeah, I do. Okay, so now the question is, halachically, is a person obligated to build a parapet around the swimming pool? We have a pool in our yard. And furthermore, not only do we have to make a parapet, do we make a bracha? Just like when you build a parapet on your roof, you make a bracha. Do we make a bracha on this? Okay, so Namar Batorah, let's get the background information. Ki tivneh bayit chadash v'yasita ma'akel legagecha v'lo tasim damim bebeitecha ki yipol hanofel mimenu. The Torah says when you build a new house, you must build a parapet on your rooftop. You shall not place blood on your home because a faller might fall off of your roof. So this is how you prevent blood from being spilled in your home. V'lochen kol adam chayv lasot makeh legago v'zu mitzvah deoraita. And therefore, every person is obligated in this, and this is a positive commandment. It's one of the 613 mitzvahs. There's a machlokas whether you make a bracha when you build the parapet. I know we did have a tshuva about this. I don't remember how long ago we did. Do you remember it, Barry? Long time ago, right? The dat harokeach shein bracha al asiyat makeh. He says the rokeach is of the opinion that you don't make a bracha on the making of a parapet. Kevin shegam goyim mitzuvim al asiyat makeh limnoa sakana u'mevarchim rak al mitzvot shemiyuchadot liYisrael. And his argument is that this is a universal law. Everyone, Jew and Gentile alike, has an obligation to protect people from hazardous situations. And you only make a bracha when something is unique to the Jewish people. That's an interesting shita. It's an interesting shita. I don't remember this shita, but that's the rokeach. Kevin sheyesh bo lav delo sasim damim beveitecha vein bevarchem al mitzvah sheyesh bo gam lav. So he writes in the name of the Baal HaItter, the Sefer, that you don't make a bracha on a makeh for a totally different simple reason. There is both a positive and negative mitzvah associated with this halacha. Not only must you build a parapet, but do not place blood in your home. So it's negative, and you don't make a bracha on a mitzvah that also has a negative associated with it, which is strange. I mean, I make Kiddush on Shabbos with a bracha, and there's a lot of negative commandments associated with the Shabbos observance. So I don't even understand the svara in that. He says, Omnam hatamim deim shamher al zemimela mimila ushchita sheish ben lav lemishover alehem v'afal pichein hoso sam mevorach alehem. He says the Sefer Tamim Deim doesn't understand this argument because you have other mitzvahs like bris milah and shchita, where there's a negative commandment associated with these things, and you still make a bracha. And therefore the Tamim Deim himself is of the opinion that you do make a bracha. He says, "V'nira lahosif otam shelo levarach al asiyat ma'akeh, kevin shekol matarat ha'ma'akeh hi la'atzilat ha'adam." He says, I think there's another reason not to make a bracha on the building of a ma'akeh, because the whole purpose of a ma'akeh is to save someone's life. V'lo matzinu bracha al inyan shel hatzala. We don't find that you make a bracha on life-saving efforts. This is a great argument. We know that the rabbis instituted the mitzvah of mayim achronim. Okay, there's a halacha. You have to wash your hands. And they instituted it at a time when substances from the meal that if they got on your fingers and then you touched your eyes, you could harm your eyes. You could blind yourself. Sodomite salt.
Spend a lot of time on SCP on this.
And SCP, right? So why is it that we don't make a bracha before we wash mayim achronim? We make a bracha after we wash netilas yadayim before the meal. So why not make a bracha on mayim achronim? So the argument goes that you're only doing it to protect yourself. You're not doing it as a means of sanctifying yourself like you do with netilas yadayim. It's for the purpose of protecting your health. Since it's only there to protect your health, to protect your eyes, that's why you don't make a bracha on it. And he quotes that this is brought in the Rambam. And Al Pizeh. So based on that, this is a very logical argument. Why you're only making a makeh to protect people from harming themselves. That's not something you make a bracha on. Omnam harambam kosav the ha'osa makeh legago mivarech la'asot makeh v'chein pasak b'sheiltot v'od poskim the yesh levarech alama. That not all the above notwithstanding, the Rambam and the Sheiltos paskin that you do make a bracha when you build a parapet. Okay, ula halacha. Afal gav de kaimel on safek brachos lahakel, and halachically, even though normally we paskin that anytime there's a question as to whether you should or should not make a bracha, what's the halacha? What's the general rule?
When in doubt, leave it out.
When in doubt, you don't make a bracha because a bracha is only rabbinic, and there's a potential of bracha levatala, which is something that the rabbis say is absolutely forbidden. So therefore, for those two reasons, there's a compelling reason to not make a bracha when there's a doubt. Mikol makom b'makom minhag lo amrinan safek brachos lahakel. The kevin shenagu levarach al asiyat hamakeh kamo shekasa b'shut rav be'ilim tzarich levarich. Once a custom is established to do a practice, you don't say, well, if it's a suffix, don't do it. Once people have already started doing a practice of making a bracha, you don't tell someone not to make a bracha because of suffix brachos lahakel. So therefore, this in the Sefer Rav Pe'ilim, he writes that since the prevailing minhag is that people do make a bracha when they build a makkah, therefore halachically, when you build a makkah on your roof, you're obligated to make a bracha.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
When we put the tefillin and in the rush,
Yeah.
we say Baruch.
Shape kivod malchuta.
Right away, so
Yeah.
because it's machloket to say the
It's a machlokes, but the prevailing halacha is that you do make a separate bracha on the shel rosh, and so we just cover our bases. It's an unusual phenomenon
Right.
because normally whenever there's a suffix, you just leave out the bracha. But here, I don't remember all of the discussion, but in the case of tefillin, there's a predominance of poskim who say that it does warrant its own separate bracha, the tefillin shel rosh. But in order to be choshesh, in order to attend to that concern of the other opinion, we just tell people to make a baruch shem kavod malchus li'olam v'ay. Okay, but so in any event, the halacha is even, and by the way, the Makor Baruch says that Rav Ovadia Yosef felt that you should not make a bracha on a makeh. And Mikol Makom B'Sifra Halichos Olam Shuv Herich Bazeh, he retracted eventually in another sefer called Halichos Olam, and therefore he said that you do make a bracha on a makeh, and therefore that's what we do. Now, V'imbonet Hamaka Al Yidei Poel Goy. Now I remember this discussion. We had this, I think, in the Baruch Omer. If you're making a makeh via a non-Jew, so do you still make a bracha? Because you're not the one actually building it. So I think we said, like, ask him if you could hammer in something, and the question was, do you do it at the beginning of the building of the makeh or at the very last board or panel that you're putting in? Yesh omrim da'afal pi shein shlichus lagoy mikol makom tzarich levarich. Even though normally a goy is not considered to be performing your proxyship, nonetheless, you still make a bracha when you have a non-Jew build it for you. We consider it nonetheless as if he is acting as your proxy and as if you're doing it yourself. And therefore you could make a bracha, even though you've hired a guy on Jiffy, the Jiffy app, to build a parapet for you, and Muhammad comes and he does it for you. You can still make a bracha. Ulam kosav b'shut toiras chesed Dilefi divrei hara'avad, delo amrinan, yad eved ki yad rabo, elarak le'inyan mamon v'lo le'inyan kiyom mitzvah. He says, however, in the Sefer Torah's Chesed, he says, we don't say that a servant who does your work is considered to be like you for the purposes of mitzvah performance. We only say it as far as financial affairs. If he goes ahead and lends money on your behalf or something like that, or does a commercial exchange, then we say that he is acting as your proxy. But when it comes to doing a mitzvah, we don't say he's your proxy. And therefore, according to him, you don't make a bracha when a non-Jew builds your makeh for you. The came in the kaimel and suffik brachos lahakel lechem lechatchila yisayim hamakeh ba'atzmo lifnei hamakosh ha'acharon v'yavarech asher kiddushanu b'mitzvah yisav v'tzivanu la'asot ma'akeh. And therefore, before you take the last hammer blow to the last, nail that's going into the building of this makeh, or the last screw that's going in, or however you're building this makeh, you should do it yourself and make the bracha of Asher Kiddushanu v'mitzvosav v'tzivanu la'asos makeh. V'im lo yachol la'asot ba'atzmo, yaseh al yidei poel Yehudi d'shlucho shel adam kamosa. Then actually, if you can't do it yourself, best to ask a Jew to do that last part for you. Okay, fine.
And then you would still, like you would.
What's that?
Who would make the bracha?
You could still make the bracha even though the Jewish worker is doing it for you. He's acting as a shliach.
What did you do with your son's pool?
I wasn't there. I don't know if he made a bracha or not. But first of all, we haven't established up until now. all we've been talking about is making a parapet for a roof.
Yeah.
Now all of this is stuff that we've already deliberated over in a tshuva, I think long ago, probably at the beginning of the Sefer. He talked about the din of Ma'akeh. Okay. Now,
Did the Torah mean it just for a roof, or did it extend it to anything?
that's the question. All right. Ula inyan zman amiras habracha. And as far as when you make the bracha, if you make it at the beginning of the building or at the end of the building, kasav bal ha'iter sheyesh levarech b'tchilas asiyas hama'akeh. So the Bala Iter says you should make the bracha when you start building the parapet, when you just put up the first a portion of fence. However, Omnam das hachasam soifer, he sheyivarech ba'ez hamakosha acharon mishum shekodim lochein eino makeh. The Chassam Sofer says you do it at the very end, because up until that point, it's not a protective parapet, right? Until you actually put up the very last panel and make a safe protection from people from falling off. Now, okay, ve'ein levarech birchas shehechiyanu al mitzvahs makeh. Do you make a shehechiyanu on a makeh? He says the answer is no. Keven she'eino ba mizman lizman, because you only make a shehechiyanu when a bracha can only be done periodically. But since a makeh can be built at any time, there's no shehechiyanu, which is surprising. I guess anytime you make a shehechiyanu,
Like shit, the animal you should. That could be serious.
Yeah.
that's true.
I don't understand that.
Let's see what he says. V'afal pisha kosav harambam kol mitzvah shehi kinyan lo. Anytime you acquire something new, the Rambam says, kagon tzitzis, tefillin, mezuzah, umakeh, such as tzitzis, tefillin, mezuzah, or a makeh, mevarech bishat asiyata shehechiyan. You make a shechiyan when you affix a mezuzah, according to the Rambam. Mikol makom lahalacha kaimelon de'in mevarchim al mitzvahs she'enam boas mizman lizman. V'lachein lo yivarech shehechiyanu al hamakeh. However, when it comes to mitzvahs, not like a new shirt, which is not a mitzvah, I guess the shehechiyanu for a new shirt is because of the joy that you get, right? But when it comes to making a shehechiyanu on a mitzvah, you don't make a shehechiyanu unless the mitzvah is a periodic one.
Do we do shehechiyanu for a mezuzah?
No, we do not. Even though the Rambam says you should. So it's interesting. Kain mashma medivrei morin beveis Yosef she'evius divrei harambam anal sheyesh levarech shehechiyanu al tefillin v'shuv hevi b'shem mahari avuav de'ein levarech shehechiyanu al mitzvahs she'eno mizman lizman v'lachein ein levarech al tefillin v'chulei v'im kein gan b'ma'akeh ein levarech. So he says you don't make a shehechiyanu on a new mitzvah, because a new mitzvah is not considered to be like an acquisition, because mitzvahs, I would argue probably mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu, that God didn't give us mitzvahs that we should have personal joy from them, even though many times you do. You get a new pair of tefillin, like that's a big thing, right? And yet we don't make a shehechiyanu on that. In any event,
You don't make a shit.
We do not.
We do.
Yeah. So that seems to be the psak of the Beis Yosef. Okay. Now, as far as why we would or wouldn't make a bracha either at the beginning of the building of the makeh or at the end of the building of the makeh, he says, Habala iter shambir svarasa, de havidumi de bedikas chametz de mavarich lifnei habedika. He says, when do you make your bracha of al bedikas chametz? You make it. Well, no, you only make one. You only make one bracha. You do it at the beginning, even though it's a protracted process. It could take hours if you need to check a very large area. The kaven shehischil b'mitzvah imsach ein kam bracha levatala kaven shelo yehefsek bein habracha lahaschalas habedika. Now, even though there may be interruptions in the entire process of bedikas chametz, it's still not a bracha levatala, because once you start the mitzvah, as long as you don't speak between the bracha and the beginning of the mitzvah, you're okay. And therefore, with building a parapet as well, the argument would go, make a bracha, start building the parapet, and even if it's going to take you a couple of days to finish it, it's okay.
Right.
Because the bracha goes on the beginning of the building. Venir levares hamachlokes bala iter v'chasam soifer. So let's see if we can understand the reason for the difference of opinion.
What about sukkah, by the way?
That's a whole question whether you make a shehechiyanu on the building of a sukkah. The poskim say that you don't. And I don't remember the reason. He says the bal ha'iter sphere mitzvahs asiyas make he be'etzem pu'ulat. I think the argument is because the mitzvah is the sitting in the sukkah, not the building of the sukkah. So anyway, the bal ha'iter sphere shemitzvahs asiyas make he be'etzem pu'ulat ha'asiyah dumi de bedikas chametz. He says the bal ha'iter is of the opinion that the mitzvah of making a makeh is the actual activity, like checking for chametz. The mitzvah that you're doing is checking for chametz. And therefore you have to make the bracha at the beginning. And the chasam sofer is of the opinion, no, it's not the action of making a parapet, that's the mitzvah. It's the making sure there is a finished parapet on your roof. That's the mitzvah. And therefore you make the bracha when you're just about to complete that process and have a finished makkah on your roof. And that's the reason why, according to the Chasam Sofer, you make the bracha in the final hammer blow. So the Rav Sharaga paskins like the Chasam Sofer, as does Rav Avadia. The Alpha Pisha Bal Ha'iter who Rishon v'licharu hayitzarach lifsok itvarav. He says even though the Bal Ha'iter is one of the Rishonim and the Chasam Sofer is only an Acharon, is a later posek. Nira demikol makom paskul levarach lifnei hamakosh acharon kiven de bekach yotzi l'divrei hakol. Because I guess even the Bala Iter would agree that if you do make the bracha at the very end, that's sufficient as well. Okay, bottom line, I noticed that David Vodiano is on the phone, so this is very relevant to the construction business. You know, if you're doing renovations for someone and you got to build a parapet, you may have to make brachas occasionally. Okay, anyway. Now,
Would he make it, or the owner would make the bracha, not David who's building it?
right, the owner would have to make the bracha, but what if the owner is not well versed? Let's say he's not a religious person. It could be that then it would fall on the builder himself. Okay, now, so we talked about the shehechiyanu, so therefore, so you don't make a shechiyanu on a makeh. V'im rotzeh, if you want to, just to cover all your bases, because the Rambam says you do make a shechiyanu on a makeh. Yavi pri chadash v'yivarech alav shechiyanu v'yichaven liftor gam mitzvah. Find a new fruit, make a shechiyanu on it, just like we do the second night of Rosh Hashanah. And have it in mind that the shechiyanu goes on both your new fruit and your ma'akeh. Now, we still haven't addressed the issue of making a parapet for a swimming pool. Ulam le'inyan lasot ma'akeh librecha. As far as making a bracha on a parapet for a swimming pool, katav maran b'shulchan aruch echad hagag ve'echad kol davar sheyesh bo sakana ve'ra'ui sheyikashel bo adam v'yistakein. Let's look at the language of the Shulchan Aruch in Choshen Mishpat. He says it makes no difference whether it's a rooftop or any area where, if it's unfenced, could bring a person to a threat to their life, and that people could stumble and fall and endanger themselves. Kagon shahita lo be'er b'chatzera. So let's say a person has a big crater in their backyard. Absolutely. Well, but that's only in a public area. Technically, you could argue that I'm not liable for damages if someone comes into my backyard and falls in, but I may still have an obligation to build a parapet. They're two different things. One is liability, and one is an obligation to protect people, right? So liability is after the fact, when someone falls in or someone falls off the roof. I may not have liability because the person had no permission to be there, okay? But I still have an obligation to prevent people from injuring themselves. So if there's a pit on my property, I either have an obligation to create some kind of enclosure that's 10 tfachim high, which is not very high when you think about it. It's only about 40 inches. So
46 and 3 feet, so.
yeah, it's a little bit, it's like 3.5 feet. So it's not a lot. So like that drunken teenager who jumped over the fence, there's no question that in halacha, the owner would not be liable. So you have to put some kind of cover on it so that people don't fall in. Umuchach milashon hashulchan aruch hanal, shekol michshol sheyakol ligrom l'sakanat nefashot, any kind of mishap that could cause people's lives to be endangered, mitzvat aseh lahasiro ulishamri mimenu ma'od. It is a mitzvah aseh to prevent that kind of hazard from occurring. Shene'amar rak hishamer lecha ushmar nafshecha ma'od. As the Torah says, be careful and protect your soul. And you have to do it for yourself and for your fellow human being. V'imlo asa kain over alav shelo tasim damim beveitecha. And if you fail to do so, then you are liable for placing blood in your home. So v'nechleku haposkim im tzarach levarich al makeh shel boru brecha. So first of all, it seems pretty clear that making a parapet around a swimming pool is part of the obligation of makeh. It seems that way, right? And it seems that I don't think Rav Shirag is equivocating on that at all. But there's a machlokes whether you need to make a bracha on that. So we've established that you do need to make a fencing, an enclosure around a pool. It's a machlokes whether you make a bracha on that enclosure. The kasav haminchas chinuch the milashon harambam b'achinuch mashma the be'er ubor yesh mitzvahs aseh shel ve'asisa makeh v'gam lav shelo tasim damim b'veitecha ve'al ken yesh levarach alav kemo b'makeh hagag. Because on the one hand, it sounds from the language of the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch that you should make a bracha on a makeh for a pit or a pool, because it's no different from a rooftop. B'chein kasav b'maser rav shechayev lasos makeh lebe'er v'tzarech levarach alav birkas hamakeh. For a well, you also have to make a parapet. That was, people didn't have swimming pools when these halachas were being written, but they did have wells, and you have to make a parapet for a well, and you have to make a bracha. That's what the Vilna Gaon was of the opinion. Avol hachaye adam kasav de'afal pisha osamakem mevarech hainu mishum desham nemar b'mefurash ve'asisa makeh legagecha. The chaye adam is of a different opinion. He says that it only says in the Torah, make a parapet for your roof. Masha'enkein beborshu rak mishum lo tasim dami beveitecha ve'ein bo mitzvahs aseh ein levarich olav. However, with a pit or a well, and where there's just a concern of do not let blood be placed in your home, and there's no fulfillment of a mitzvah because it's not a rooftop specifically, he says, therefore you should not make a bracha. Ulahalacha chayiv lasos makeh lebrecha mishum lo tasim damim beveitecha. Bottom line, you must make a parapet around the swimming pool. You don't make a bracha because it's unclear as to whether you are fulfilling the positive commandment or not. Okay, just in time. We did this whole tshuva. Perfect.
Rabbi.
Yes, Shmuel.
Just a question. The fence around your own personal house, would that be okay, or do you need a separate makkah for the swimming pool?
I don't understand the question.
Most houses have fences around them now. In Thornhill, everybody has a fence around their house
Yeah.
for the backyard as well, where you have a swimming pool.
So if you're saying the backyard is completely enclosed,
Yes, would you need a separate makkah?
you need it, right? I suppose it depends upon whether people have access to the backyard. Let's say your guests have access to the backyard. Let's say your little kids have access to the backyard when they're visiting you. It would seem that building a parapet is an obligation, specifically just around the pool if people are going to have access to your backyard. Just like it's no different from a rooftop in that respect. It's a great question, Shmuel, but it would seem it's no different from a rooftop, right? A rooftop is your private home, and your home is enclosed. But if people still can get up to your roof, you still have to build a parapet. Same thing should be true for a swimming pool. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.